Steven, Sol, good morning. How are you both doing today?
Great. Buenos dias.
Buenos
Buenos
dias.
dias. Very excited to be chatting with you both. Let's go ahead and just jump straight in. I want to start by backing up a little bit and really digging into how we got to this moment sitting here on stage talking about tech and the Latino market. So, Steven, you just announced your new role as Chief Business Officer of Tripas. I want to dig into that a little bit. And Sol, you've been an international business executive. Michal mentioned this before. You've served as CEO of multiple large cap international businesses, Fortune 500 companies. You're also a seasoned innovator, the first to deploy broadband, for example, amongst many other accomplishments. So, Sol, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your background and what brought us here to this moment today?
Okay, I've been in the business for a long time. So I've been involved in the digitization of everything starting in the 70s. So I am, let's call it a historian of what's been happening. Innovating with broadband back in those days with the evolution of what we thought could be done with cable companies and telcos and others, and in terms of enabling most of what all of you have been talking about today and yesterday and on into the future. The second thing, though, has been about innovating around services, because the thematic that I would want to leave with everybody today is we can talk about technology, but at the end of the day, who's going to use it, who's going to watch it, who's going to consume it in whatever the various forms and fashions are, and ultimately who pays for it. So the consumer has always been my mantra, has always been my driver, which enabled the first deployment of broadband, which enabled the first real smartphone when I was running Orange over in London, or in Australia, where we innovated around these ultra high-speed wireless broadband networks coming to market with the applications and the enablement of a lot of what we're talking about today and on into the future.
Steven?
So this has been a long, strange journey, because I started my career actually in finance thanks to a program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, and they were trying to diversify Wall Street back in 1994. And I was an intern at this little company called the Blackstone Group, and there definitely was no black at Blackstone back then. But 25 years, we're still having this conversation about, where are, kind of the people of color in tech, especially in this new mainstream America. And I love that Sol focuses on the consumer, because the growth engine of America is truly the Latino market. And so I'm excited that, we're here talking about this, because Terry, this needs to be discussed.
Be talked about. And to that point, so 94% of Latinos use mobile devices to access the internet, and the purchasing power of the Latino market is growing 70% faster than the non-Latino market. And so there's a huge sort of opportunity here. I'm curious to hear from both of you if there was a moment or over time in both your lives and or careers where you began to really realize the true power and influence of the Latino market in tech, in entrepreneurship, in business. Was there a moment, a time? How did that show up for both of you?
Well, I'll start by saying the first moment in time was when I was born as a Trujillo. And that's simply because as I was growing up, I grew up in the state of Wyoming. So think about that, at Trujillo in Wyoming. And what I found was that there were a lot of people that didn't understand what a Trujillo was, et cetera, et cetera. So it played into my career as I started running companies. And I always think about customers and who are the customers. So my first moment about the importance of the Latino cohort was when I was running one of the Baby Bells. And I found that the most consumptive cohort we had in our base of customers was the Latina consumer, because they consume communications products and services at a higher rate than any other cohort that we had, and our average revenue per customer was higher than the other cohorts. And I was looking at the data and trying to help people understand that, and it carried through in terms of all the things that we've now seen in terms of smartphone introductions, the penetration of technology in this cohort in the United States has been way above every other cohort, because they're consumptive for many different social purposes and business purposes.
I mean, when you think about what Saul was talking about, and I think he's being very humble as CEO of US West or Orange or Telstra, but he also served on the boards of PepsiCo and Target and WPP and Bank of America. Again, the growth driver has always been the Latino market and then, larger, the multicultural market, if you will. And so I've worked in tech for over 20 years, and when I was working with Walmart, I was running all of their media business. And it was fascinating that here you have Fortune 1 company, and all the growth was coming from multicultural consumers, but specifically the Latino cohort was the driver. And so when you just look at the math, here you have a company where they have, I think, 11% of all Walmarts are in Texas, 7% in California, 6% in places like Ohio and other states. These are all multicultural majorities. And so literally, you can't make the math work. And so how are you investing your dollars? How are you truly following the consumer? And then you think about culture. The largest, kind of most streamed musician on the planet last year was Bad Bunny. And so when you start to see all these things, I mean, you've heard all these stats, that, salsa outsells ketchup, like all of these kind of things, but for some reason, there is a lack of investment in capital, but we're all talking about where our consumers going, and the growth is coming from the Latino cohort.
I really want to dig into this idea of the multicultural, expansive demographic within the Latino culture. We were just talking about this backstage. My grandparents were Panamanian immigrants, and so when I think about my identity as an Afro-Latina woman, I am one segment of many within, the Latino community. I'm curious how you both think about that from the innovative, entrepreneurial, and consumer standpoint, just the multicultural dynamics within the Latino market.
Well, I want to put an exclamation mark for everybody here to understand that in the United States, the U.S. Latino cohort is generating $2.7 trillion worth of GDP. So what does that mean? It means it's the equivalent size of France, very close to the UK. There will be a new study done by economists this year that will show that it's probably going to pass France, UK, as a size of a market within the borders of the United States, okay? It's growing our GDP within the economy today at nearly 30% of the total volume of GDP growth in the country. So what does that mean? It means that they're buying more, consuming more. 52% of all new home sales in the United States, new mortgages taken out, are to the Latino cohort. Last time I checked, that's not a niche. 50% generally seems to be the most, or majority.
Generally speaking.
Of all of that. And then when you look at other automotive sales, almost everything, every consumer-based product, and now soon to be B2B product, is going to be consumed by these entrepreneurs, by these people that are younger. The most common age of a Latino or Latina in the country is 11. To put it in context, the most common age of the Anglo-American cohort is 58. So if you're building a business for the next few decades and thinking strategically, and you're thinking about 1 million Latinas turn 18 every year, there's a huge wave. We have a tsunami. And I'm going to say one last thing, not to take too long here. There's a person that is a well-known business publisher and economist, and he talked about the Latino cohort as like the cohort is the cavalry that's coming over the hill to save the U.S. economy. Back to what Stephen said about inflation and what the Fed chairs and other people are talking about. I think they're talking in a 20th century context as opposed to a 21st century context.
I want to give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions if you have them, so start thinking about them. Before we get to that, first, I want to dig into some of the work that you both are doing today. So maybe we can start with you, Stephen. You just announced your news with Tripas, and previously were working at Encantos. Can you share a little bit more when you think about the Latino market in tech and entrepreneurship? What are you most excited about with the work you're doing now?
Absolutely. Well, as a proud father of 2 young kids, I think Saul's insight about understanding the power of Gen Alpha. This is kind of kids born after 2010. Certainly, kids that are growing up with Alexas, Google, Siri in the house. But this is now over 50+% of this market of kids is actually diverse. and it's being led by the Latino cohort once again. And so we started a kids entertainment company that was really grounded in tech, digital and physical products. But the whole idea was to tap into this because their stories aren't being told, they're not seen. I mean, great that you have maybe some folks talking about it, but literally there are more animals in kind of children's books and content than there are Latinos. So this is a problem that we set out to solve. And fast forward, with Saul as an investor and some other great folks like Jeff Weiner, who is the CEO of LinkedIn, Charles Hudson. We actually have this incredible company doing kids and family IP, and we just actually merged with a larger company called Tripas, which if you're familiar with what Reese Witherspoon has done with Hello Sunshine or what LeBron has done with Spring Hill, the biggest Latino actor on the planet, Eugenio Derbez, he's building that company at Tripas, and now we're going to be the kids division of it, and I'm now the chief business officer of that company.
Amazing. The point around in children's books, more animals than Latinos, it really rings true. It kind of reminds me of the anecdote around team pages. I don't know if you all have heard this before, but sometimes you're more likely to see the photo of the team dog than you are of a person of color on the team page. Rings true. Thanks for mentioning that. Sol? Curious to hear when it comes to some of the things that you're focused on today, lots of things. Latitude, you have Latitude Ventures. Curious to hear about what you're really focused on as you think about the Latino market.
Well, I'm focused on our economy in the United States and around the world in terms of how we think about it. And all of you that, everything I've heard so far on stage, nobody's just limited to a geography, but the biggest and most profitable geography in the world is the United States. And I know that other countries have volumes, but profitability is still the challenge for any CEO or any investor to be thinking about. So I've been thinking about, in our economy today, as we age with the baby boomers, I'm a baby boomer, as we age, our throw weight changes. And the question is how do we replace it like any business? As you think about wave one of a technology versus wave two or wave three, we have to be thinking about our succession as a nation. Well, guess what? We have a unique differentiator in our country called the Latino cohort because they're so young. And also the most entrepreneurial cohort in America. They generate about 80% of all net new businesses in the last decade and a half, 50% of all net new employer-based businesses in the United States, and they're supplying 80% of all net new workplace entrants and the consumption numbers that you've talked about. So I'm spending my time thinking about, does everybody understand this? So I've been involved in creating a new platform, an event called Latitude, where we bring in CEOs, and I won't name all of them that we're going to be there this year, political leaders and economists and others, and tech people to come in and talk about this cohort. Because this is, if you want to make money, I mean, it's nice to have ideas, but it's even better to have the ideas make some money for those who invest. And so we're focused on getting this conversation, helping it understood, and also looking at what are driver variables. Driver variables are always youth of a population and their adaptability. Two is the notion of income growth, which is happening with this cohort. And then three is how you think about leveraging it within an economy. And so there's a lot of things I've been working on. I could stay here for about 3 months talking about all of it. But building platforms, communicating it, investing. And the last point I'll just make is, and Stephen made it earlier, I had a Bain Consulting do a study last year. Less than 1% of all invested capital by VCs and PE have gone into this cohort, who is the most prolific business formation cohort in the country. Now, I'm a capitalist. I believe capital should flow to where the growth is. So we've got to fix some clog in the system. Part of it's knowledge and awareness. Part of it is how you find it. It's like those of you that look for talent, and I think it was Stuart talking earlier about, where their employees are coming from. They're coming from everywhere now, not just the same places. So think about, don't look in the same places for innovation. Don't look in the same places for talent. And don't look in the same places either where you're going to access capital or find capital.
I mean, Saul is being, way too nice and, extremely humble about it. Saul now has one of the preeminent venture firms called Latitude VC investing in Latino-backed startups. And the fact that that 1% number, given all the growth that we're talking about, given that literally you look at millennials, everyone wants to reach millennials, Gen Z, the majority of those consumers, those cohorts, are led by multicultural consumers, and again, led by the Latino cohort. So there's a disconnect where you have these bubbles of Silicon Valley, product people, engineers trying to build for the customer, the audience, but it's all kind of depersonalized. They don't understand that that consumer is actually going to be driven probably by a Latina mom, which is the kind of main consumer focus of any retailer, just understanding the household formations. And so I feel like these bubbles, whether it's Silicon Valley or kind of fintech or whatever it is, no one's really looking at this cohort. And again, hopefully folks like GB and others are really going to make that investment to really invest in the Latino community.
And to both of your points, I really like this idea of, we can talk about diversity, inclusion, equity. I personally believe, that's good to do, good for the world, but this is also just a really big business opportunity. There's money to be made here. There's a cohort that can really be and will be the future consumers.
It's a business growth driver.
You're exactly right. And at Latitude, where I will have a lineup of 10 or 12 major global CEOs, I always tell them before they come, we don't talk about diversity, we don't talk about inclusion. We talk business. And I want you to understand, when we talk about what we've just been referring to, it's all about business. And if you focus on how you make money, who your customers are, et cetera, all the other things happen, because you need people on your boards, you need people in your C-suites, and you need people in your investing portfolios to understand where this growth is.
When we think about, in our last couple of minutes here, this market continuing to grow, I'm curious to hear from each of you, what is your ask of the broader tech industry, business world, the non-Latino market? I think we've alluded to this a little bit, but what is it that the industry really needs to do to ensure that we are moving and serving this really large cohort in the world?
Well, I'll be the appetizer to Saul so he could actually put the exclamation point. I mean, for me, it's really forums like this, right? How do you actually get on the big stage, not like, kind of the ghettoized version, if you will, the little Latino, kind of cohort in the corner. No, on the main stage at Fortune Brainstorm Tech, talking about this. That is super helpful. But we need more. And the reality is, I'm super excited about Web3. I'm super excited about the creator economy, because now you're actually giving the ability for creators to have ownership and kind of connect directly with their communities, with their customers. And the majority of those creators are people of color, led again by the Latino cohort. I'll be a broken record about this. Every single company that's been here, from Stuart at Slack today to you name it, they all are looking for growth, and growth is only going to happen with this Latino cohort. So the more that we talk about it from a business driver perspective, not from a charity, not from a diversity perspective, an HR perspective, from a business growth perspective, this is the growth engine. And as goes the Latino market, again, 18% today, going to 30%, a third of the country by 2040. But you don't have to wait for the future. The future is now, because in every majority market, every top 20 DMA, it is a multicultural majority today, led by Latinos.
Absolutely. Sol, last 20 seconds here.
Well, I want to ask a question of all of you. How many of you are even aware of what we talked about today? It's hard to see from here.
Good number, not everyone though.
But a
not
good
everyone.
number. But the question is the media writing about it? So that, and I don't mean just traditional media, but all forms of media, are they talking about it so that people become more aware? Are people really hiring people and investing in these kinds of companies? And so the exclamation mark for me is, look, I'm a capitalist. I've made my shareholders tens of billions of dollars of value. And I want to encourage all of you that are innovating, that are running companies, building companies, to think about this as you're building your teams, as you're thinking about allocating capital, and as you think about what are the platforms that are going to be most interesting to the cohorts that are of high volume.
The business growth standpoint. Amazing.
Absolutely.
Sol, Stephen, thank you so much for coming today.
Gracias.